Everybody, and welcome back to Prosper in the Kingdom. And glad to have you back. Wendy, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Happy to be here and hope everyone
How
had
was
a happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, how was your turkey day?
It was good. I had all my kids together and it was fun because that doesn't happen now that three of them are out of the house. It's much harder to get them together and three of them out of the house and all living in different cities. So it was fun.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. Yeah, we had a pretty good Thanksgiving too. I ended up hanging out with my kids, and then we had a little bit of a family emergency with my mother up north, and that's actually kind of the driver behind the conversation today. So we're going to talk a little about that. But no, I started taking these new supplements,
Mm-hmm.
peptides, and this is the first Thanksgiving that I still ate like I ate and gained 0 weight, and I love it. So I'm
Nice.
going to be talking about that a little bit more later, but wanted to give it a field test, and that was my strong field test one, and it worked out great. So as we're
Wow.
talking about, how to be healthy, wealthy, and wise, we'll bring that up on a later healthy conversation. But today we are talking about 5 things that you need to do to prepare for aging parents. And this is something that, it came up this past weekend
Mm-hmm.
rather, over the Thanksgiving holiday, and had to cut my immediate family short. Mom couldn't come down for the holiday, but I ended up running up there to kind of help her out with some stuff. But it all worked out. But we realized that we're at that phase now that we need to start looking at what's the next chapter in her older life, right? She just turned
Mm-hmm.
75 and, can't get around like she used to. And she's by herself and, fiercely independent, but there comes a point in time where you got to kind of circle the wagons around them. So I don't know if you can relate to that at all, but that's something that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. Yeah. My parents aren't quite there yet. They're still pretty active, a little bit younger than your parents, but um, we had, in fact, it's funny. My dad and I were talking about it this past weekend over Thanksgiving, because there's some other family that we have that are kind of losing a little bit of their pep and their step and their mind a little bit. And,
Mm-hmm.
my dad was saying, I'm grateful because we don't have a history of, I mean, pretty much people in my family go strong to about 92 and then they're like, okay, peace out, downhill the last year. But, um, yeah, but it's good to be prepared for sure. And, while we didn't have to do like any kind of nursing homes or long-term care or anything like that
Yeah.
with my grandparents, there were definitely, it was, a lot to get things in line to have, their end of life with the way they wanted it. So,
Yeah, yeah. No, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, looking at how do I even start this? What do I do, and should I even consider it? I mean, at some point, and for you, the viewers out there, the listeners, if you're catching us on a podcast, your parents may not be there yet, or maybe you're like, they're kind of getting to that point. I'm an older Gen X, right? My mom's a baby boomer. She was born in '49. And like I said, she's 75 years old, and the cognitive skills aren't quite what they used to be. She's still pretty sharp and things like that. She's not getting around like she used to, just had a knee replaced and things like that. So, it happens, right? Getting old is not for the weak. But what can you do? The last thing you want to do is kind of be unprepared, and then all of a sudden it gets dropped in your lap and you got to react to everything, and you're
right.
kind of scrambling and creating chaos and dealing with all that high stress, things like that. So the first step is really to kind of sit down and start the conversation early, kind of be proactive, not
Mhm.
reactive, right? Kind of, have that conversation casually, don't sit down and say, okay, you guys are going into an assisted living or whatever the case may be, because you think about your independence, right? You're talking about removing some of their independence at whatever level. So it can be intimidating. It can be a little scary. So you want to be very careful broaching the conversation, but you definitely want to have the conversation early and sitting down with them and really not telling them what you're going to do, but understanding what they have as
Mhm.
far as their wishes for their health, right? Their finances, the living arrangements, any end of life care, stuff like that. And approach the conversation again, not like, a mandate or anything like that. Be compassionate, be patient. They may initially just blow it off, but it's an important conversation. You know, I use a lot of jokes with my mom, and, you know, we talk about, well, okay, then I'll just give you a 13-inch black and white TV and put you in my garage. Then that's cool. I would never do that. Obviously, that was a joke. And she just kind of rolls her eyes at me. And then, but it does allow that conversation to happen. But the goal is stressing to your parents that you're trying to learn what their wishes are, and then, you know, get them to what their goal is, right? And to be happy in the end of their days and stuff like that, but still make sure that, you know, they're able to be taken care of either by you, or if you've got siblings and stuff, you kind of divide responsibilities. And that's something that if you do have siblings, now in my situation, with my mother, I'm an only child on that side. You know, I've got a half brother and sister with my father, but, you know, so it's all on me, and she's 9 hours away. So that creates a lot of stress for everybody. And she's been very reluctant to, you know, want to move and things like that. But I think she's finally at the point now, she realized she needs to be closer and wants to be closer to, you know, her extended family and things like that. But definitely want to start the conversation early, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And while they're, you know, it's like you said, be proactive, not reactionary, because, you know, for instance, like my grandfather, we had to make, I don't know why it wound up falling on me. I made a lot of decisions in his like hospice care and things like that. And because his daughters and my grandmother's wife didn't want to do it, you know, and it was like, nobody could make up their mind. And Wendy, what do you think? I have no idea why I was the voice, but I think, you know, we didn't have those conversations with my grandfather ahead of time on what, you know, what do we do if your organs are failing? Do you want, you know, how do you want to go? Do you want to be in a hospital? Do you want to be at home? Do you want medication? Do you know, we didn't have those conversations until it was too late. Right. And so it's better to have those conversations. Like my parents are, you know, 65 and 67 now, have that conversation now about what their wishes are and what that looks like, so that, you know, if there comes a time that they're not able to speak for themselves, it's already handled.
Well, and it's kind of, you're planning together rather than you making all the decisions when they're, you know, and then all of a sudden you don't know what their wishes are, things like that. So that's key. And part of that, you know, you had commented about what are the wishes. Once you understand that, you want to sit down, and we've talked about this before too, the legal documents, right? The financial documents. You know, we talked about wills, living wills, power of attorney, you know, healthcare directives, you know, going back to what you were just talking about, you know, are you okay being in a hospital, or if it's, you know, you want to go home and pass away, or whatever the case may be. And getting into the financial stuff, obviously, you know, that's what we do with the Turning Point team and the Malari Group, you know, is introducing our clients to various resources from an estate plan and a financial planning to make sure that they've got plenty of money, and, you know, where it's at. The power of attorneys are going to help with that. And obviously, you know, that's a very touchy decision, because, you know, if there's a child who is trustworthy, then that may be the one. And then, you know, the older child is not maybe trustworthy and they're off the rails, so they may get a little, you know, offended or whatever. But again, it's a very touchy subject, and a lot of trust and things like that. You want to go through and make sure that you as a child have all of their insurance policies, that the beneficiaries are all up to date. You know, if you've got a trust, that the beneficiaries are the trust, not necessarily individuals. And again, you want to talk to a planner if you need help on that. Obviously, that's what we do. But that way, you as the adult child can have a complete understanding of the financial picture, you know, including their income, their assets, their debts, things like that, on what's going on. So in the event that something does happen to one parent, maybe that parent takes care of the bills, or in, you know, a situation like mine where there's only the one parent, they lose, you know, capacity, right? Mental capacity, and can no longer have those conversations. And that's where it gets really tricky, because if you wait too long, they're not mentally capable, you're not going to be able to get the POA, the power of attorneys and things like that, because an attorney is going to say they're not capable. And then that just takes all your options off the table for your parent. And then, you know, somebody else is making the decision. So, you know, step one, start the conversation early. Step two, organize those legal and financial documents. And then step three, and this is kind of one of the big ones, is, you know, evaluate their living arrangements. You know, my mom is a very independent woman. She's in a small single-story house by herself. You know, she's been there forever, and that's her home. But it's you know, it's nowhere near her family. All of her friends have passed on. She's got a few friends left, but they're in kind of similar situations. So it's kind of hard for her to be truly independent anymore, without creating, risk and havoc for herself. And, what do they want to do? Their current home, is it safe? Access, do you need to change some kind of access modifications? My mom had a couple incidents where she tripped, and fell in the front yard. Well, she's 75 by herself and, can't get around that great. That's not a good situation, especially they get a lot of snow up there if it were winter or something like that. But, looking at in-home care, do you have somebody that just can check on them once a day or twice a day? Do they need somebody, full-time, or maybe even assisted living, or, downsizing at home? If you're just two parents, and you're elderly and you've got an upstairs and this massive house you're trying to take care of and you don't really need it anymore, let's talk about downsizing it. Get a 1-story with a, first floor bedroom and stuff like that. And all that stuff's real. I remember, why do you need a first floor bedroom? Well, now that I'm older, it's like, man, that's kind of nice. I don't have to keep running up and down those stairs all the time and stuff. So, it's something that you definitely need to think about, the living arrangements. And then, whether or not do they stay with us? Do they move in, with a sibling, or what's the situation? And that's, again, where you want to have that family meeting. And families are all different. Some families get along great. Some families don't talk to each other. So that's definitely something that, it's your mom and dad, or, your mom or your dad. You definitely want to make sure that they were there for you as you were growing up. So make sure you're there for them as they grow older and go into their next chapter. So I don't know if you got anything to add on those living arrangements.
No, I mean, we see all different things, right? I think it's definitely, again, having that conversation early, because should they become incapacitated and they're all the only one, those are big decisions to make, right? Selling property or moving them. And, and I always am like thinking about, what did my grandparents do? We had to all chip in and pay for my grandmother for her place. She went from living in a house that she owned and, to a smaller apartment. I had one grandmother that bebopped around she lived, depending on the month, she lived at somebody else's house. But that's where, kind of leading into our next point here, is building a support network, right? And that's where figuring out who in the family, extended family or friends, are going to be in that circle to help with responsibilities, or with, living arrangements, different things like that. So leaning into that and figuring out who's that circle. Sometimes it's not the kids, right? Sometimes it's not who the obvious answer, because, of strained relationships or whatever. So figuring out, who's, where they can stay, who's going to be the one helping them. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times when you don't have these conversations, it winds up falling. We hear over and over in our planning, right, that it falls on one family member. I mean, there's been countless times we've heard somebody say, oh, we have 5 siblings, but for some reason I'm the one that has to do everything. Right. So having those conversations.
Yeah, and that impacts that sibling quite a bit, because if they're the caretaker and they want to go on vacation, it's like having a pet, right? You got to figure out, okay, well, I want to go on a cruise for a week, but I'm taking care of mom. So what do I do now? And so that's where it's critical to have that conversation and figure out, okay, what's going to do, how are we all going to contribute, right? It shouldn't be left on to one person, in my opinion, right? And now in my situation, it's a little different because I'm literally the only one. But I've got cousins and stuff that have been helping out and are going to continue to help out. And that's, I'm blessed to have that, right? Yeah. But that support network, and not only that, getting them plugged into a local group. A lot of communities have, I forget what they call them, but it's basically like, not adult care. They have that too, adult daycare, but it's where they have senior citizens centers. There you go. Yeah. Where they can go and just interact and mingle with others, play games and stuff. And that's critical, whether it's that or getting involved in their church activities, or, getting them plugged into an awesome church that they like. Not your church necessarily, one that they like, their church, right? But it's critical that they have that continued interaction and they're not just isolating themselves, just staying at home watching, Gunsmoke or Rifleman all day long. And that's again, building that support network. So it's not just support network for, them as far as care, but support network for them as far as that, style of life, right? Yeah. To have a good quality of life. And so, that's, number 4 is building that support network. Number 5, and this is kind of the critical piece as they start getting older, is what are the caregiving needs? We were just talking a little bit about that, but, talking about medical or, long-term, short-term, things like that. Is it going to be extended family? Is it going to be, what kind of health conditions they have? What medications? I know I just went and got a list of my mom's medications, and I'm thinking she's taking 2 or 3 things. Oh my gosh, there's like a list. Some are twice a day, some 3 times a day, morning only, afternoon. So trying to coordinate all that, and then making sure that she's taking her meds, and remembering to take it. So, we had the conversation of like, okay, here's the morning pill box, here's the afternoon pill box, and here's when you fill them up. I mean, so just, helping them with all of that. It may seem simple to you, but again, that stress level goes up, and, she's not able to do the stuff, and you want to make sure that she's got it, or he has a long, healthy life and things like that. But, what are the plans, right? What are the plans? And then even taking that a step further, looking at, what are their needs today versus their future needs, and, looking at those living options, and those living options may change.
Right.
You look at, are we doing in-home care? Are we doing assisted living? Are we doing nursing home? And then looking for a place, number 1, that you can afford, right? Or that they can afford, or that your family can afford. Number 2 is, what kind of care do they need? Is it proximity wise? Is it something that, I'm in Tennessee and she's in Indiana, I'm going to keep her in Indiana. Well, no, I mean, I'm not going to see her maybe twice a year. She's down here. It's like, oh, I can see her quite a bit. Right. And that's, they want to be around family as well, just like you and I do. But those exploring, and the cost is obviously a big factor, right? There's a lot of things that you can do to plan for them and things like that. But then, also looking at, is Medicaid an option, state care, things like that. And a lot of people kind of cringe at that, but, unfortunately, that's what most people end up doing. Yeah. And there's rules with that, right? It's one of the things that, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. There was a delay. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. But you look at, what are the spin down rules? What are the Medicaid planning, especially if you've got one that's going into care and the other parent's still able to take care of themselves. Well, there's an allowance situation. So you want to understand all those rules. There are attorneys and people that can help you that specialize in Medicaid, assisted living, that can help. But, assisted living costs, it's something that's not cheap. But Medicaid, the state is designed to come in and take care of your parents so they don't end up homeless if you don't have the ability, and it's not cheap. I mean, a lot of places anymore, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month, and that's on the lower end. Yeah. And it can get fairly expensive. The more help they need, it can get more and more expensive. Obviously, if they're independent and kind of doing their own thing or just looking at an apartment, that's one thing. But if they need nursing care, or they're in a wheelchair and need 24-hour service, and that's something that may progress over time. So just understanding, looking at creating that team, right? That we talk about teams on other things. It's the same way, getting those professionals, looking at an elder care attorney, obviously the financial advising, we do a lot of that with our elderly clients, but the Medicaid specialist, this isn't something you want to try to figure out on your own with Google. That can be a definite first step to make sure that you're kind of in the right place and getting things going. But, again, I want to be sensitive to the time. But you definitely want to make sure that you're planning in advance and kind of getting a game plan. So if your parents, are post 70, or they've got some health issues, maybe even younger, but they've got health issues, you definitely want to look at that. So just kind of recap, the 5 things you need to look at. Number 1, start the conversation early. Number 2, organize those legal and financial documents, kind of get those all in a game plan. Make sure you've got a copy and somebody else has a copy in case something happens to you, your sibling or something. Number 3, evaluate the living arrangements. Currently, what do they want to do? And then what are their wishes as they kind of progress in age? That's going to give you kind of the framework to plan, meeting their wishes so they're not fighting you every step of the way. Number 4, start building that support network for mom and dad. You're helping with that, your family's helping with that and whatnot. And what are the rules of communication, right? So someone's not running off and trying to solve everything by themselves and then nobody else is in the loop. But building that support network. And then again, kind of preparing for those caregiving needs for later on, what's current versus future, assisted living, what kind of services do we need? And then understanding, okay, how does Medicaid play into all of this? Are they going to be able to help us? And then looking at those costs, not only short term and today, what that's going to do is allow you to plan, and you're going to plant the seeds with mom and dad, so it's in their mind. It's not something that's you're showing up one day selling all their stuff and moving them into a home, because that's what a lot of elderly people think, and that's that causes a lot of issues. So
yeah, and yeah, just it's bottom line is that communication piece, and then it feels overwhelming, like one, to have the conversation, but then all the things you have to get in order as far as legal documents and things. But once you have it and you have it done, it's such a relief. And talk to other people, outside your family that have gone through it. And if they, if somebody's just been through the process, then you have someone there that's already navigated it. It's not as overwhelming if you just take the action, make it happen. And yeah, figure out I think, that big starting point is who's on the team with you, who's the one that's going to help have the conversation, what siblings are involved and things like that. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, everybody, thanks again for joining us today, and do us a favor, give us some love, give us a little like, share this if you know some people with some aging parents, just things to consider. If we can help you out on the financial side, reach out to us. Wendy Lee online, JonCleaver.com. Schedule a free consultation. Just get an idea of what we could do to help you out. And again, make it awesome and help prepare for your parents and their future. Kind of looking at the big picture, and take a look at Proverbs 13:22. A good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children. So help your parents kind of get everything together. And that doesn't necessarily mean a pile of cash. It can also mean a stress-free retirement for them, which is going to be a stress-free life for you. So everybody have a great day, and we'll see you next week on Prosper in the Kingdom.